Hello, I'm Steve Drake, and I serve as treasurer and board member of the National China Garden Foundation. As part of our commemoration of the Asian Pacific American Heritage Month of May, the foundation is conducting a series of fireside chats with key figures in politics, education, business, and international relations in the Washington, D.C. area to be streamed at the end of the month. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing one of Washington, D.C.'s absolutely most prominent figures. Dr. Ronald Mason is president of the University of the District of Columbia, a position he's held since 2015. President Mason, thank you for hosting us on the UDC campus and for sharing your thoughts and perspectives with us today. I'd like to start by maybe having you talk a little bit about this institution you lead, the University of the District of Columbia, and your path to your current position, if you would. Introduce us, if you would, to UDC and to Dr. Ronald Mason.
To myself. Well, thank you first for having me. It's a real honor and privilege. About the university, we are unique in the world. We're the only public institution of higher learning in and for the nation's capital. We are a creature of the District of Columbia. Our roots go back to 1851 with minor college for colored girls, which merged with Wilson School for white girls and became D.C. Teachers College. And then the federal government chartered two colleges in the district, one Washington Technical Institute, which was a 2-year school, and the other one was Federal City College, which was a 4-year school. When the district got home rule in 1976-77, D.C. Teachers College, Washington Teachers Institute, and Federal City College merged to become University of the District of Columbia. So in some ways we go back to 1851, but in other ways we're a very new school, less than 50 years old. And so we've been creating the kind of institution that we think will be a model for the future of higher education, because we are one entire talent production pipeline under one accreditation umbrella. You look at us as the entire system of higher education for the District of Columbia. We do workforce certification, which connects to associate's degrees, which connects to bachelor's degrees, and we're building pipelines with multiple credentials that are seamless and multiple on and off ramps, so that a student can come to us, depending on where their highest level of potential is at the time, get a workforce certificate, but also the light may go off and they can end up with a PhD.
Wow.
Now, as for me, so I'm from New Orleans. I'm a lawyer by training, Columbia undergrad, Columbia Law. Was general counsel and senior vice president at Tulane University for about 17 years, which was the first half of my career. And then the second half, I decided I wanted to work at historically black colleges and universities. So I spent 10 years as president of Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi, 5 years as president of the Southern University System in Baton Rouge, and now I'm in my 6th year at the University of the District of Columbia. Fortunately, all the mistakes I made before I got here, so that now I think UDC is going to be the best work and the best way to end my career.
That's great. Well, I won't ask you about your mistakes, but I will ask you this. If you have a typical day, can you describe what is the typical day for President Mason here at the University of the District of Columbia?
So, after 40-some years in higher education, I've learned that the typical day is not typical.
Right.
So anything could happen anytime. My day usually starts when I wake up at about 5. I'll get to work maybe 7:30. On a good day, I'll get home by 7 and cook dinner with my wife. Mm-hmm. And usually it's a series of meetings in between. Throw in town hall meetings with faculty, board meetings every quarter, committee meetings in between the board meetings, dinners and lunches, either with groups or with individuals to raise money or to sell the university. And so you just sort of get used to being ready to do anything, anytime, anywhere, because besides the things that are scheduled, there's always something that's going to happen that you didn't expect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How about, what's the most challenging moment or situation for you during that 6-year tenure here at the University of the District of Columbia?
So part of the history of the university is that, remember I said it was 3 institutions merged in 77? Well, they didn't really merge. They sort of just pushed them together. And so you had three institutions that have been trying to become one for a very long time. And then when the federal government took over the District of Columbia in 1996, they had to cut all of the government budgets in order to reset the future of the district. And you can see it worked, depending on your perspective, but DC is not the same place it was in 96. But they drastically cut the university's budget for a lot of different reasons, right? And so the university has had 20 presidents in the last 40-something years. Stability has been an issue. I've been here less than 6 years, but I'm the longest serving president. And so the biggest challenge actually was two things. One, overcoming the what I call the ghost of the old UDC, because people had a lot of memories about the institution that was here after the damage was done by all of these major budget cuts. It had a lot of challenges, but also helping the district see that even though the district itself has been reset, and every major institution, the parks, the recreation system, the public schools, are all now world-class entities, right? The last one on the list is the public university, which ironically is the hub for the future of all of the rest of the district. And so right now we're in the process of helping the district understand the value of its own university.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. I'd like to ask you a couple questions as we, mark and celebrate Asian Pacific American Heritage Month about perhaps your Asian students here at UDC, the whole issue of diversity here at UDC. So first, I guess, can you tell us a little about the Asian community here at UDC, your faculty and your students?
Sure. So we're technically an historically black college and university. But unlike the original 105 that were written into the Higher Education Act of 1965, we are actually a congressionally mandated HBCU. So we don't have the usual demographics. For example, we're only 60% African American. We're 10% international, and then with 30% other. Now in the international are our Asian Pacific Rim students. We have about 150, and they're spread out across most of our programs, primarily business and engineering. And we have a robust group of faculty members, and I'm not going to name names because I'll forget one, but one is a very exciting young man, Dr. Tan. I'm going to mention him because he really is going to be a bright star for the future of the institution. And he's taken the UDC like a duck to water, and we're happy to have him. And so, things have slowed down a bit since the prior administration in Washington sort of put a damper on international students coming to America, period. Mm-hmm. But we can see it starting to pick back up, and I'm ready to make my next trip to China as soon as we can arrange it.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, what about over the last year? What about COVID, and particularly your Asian students? Whether those who wanted to travel here to go to school here, or perhaps who lived here. Have they felt sort of some of the Asian hate that we keep hearing about?
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it that much in DC in general. But at the university, we're so used to diversity in so many different ways. Income, ethnic diversity, preparation level diversity, age diversity. We're just that kind of place. And I think it's a welcoming environment to everybody, and everybody seems to get along. So I haven't seen that, and haven't had any reports of it. As far as being able to stay on track educationally, our students who were here stayed here and didn't lose a beat, because we were able to transition pretty quickly to the online mode of delivery, because we've been training all the faculty for the last 3 years, right? So there was that, but we did lose some students transitioning from high school to college, but not a lot of those who are going to be Asian or Asian American. So
that's good.
Yeah.
So you mentioned diversity, and that it's sort of just part of the DNA here, I guess, at the university. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I know I teach part-time at the University of Maryland, and we talk a lot about diversity as if we need to talk about it, et cetera. But it sounds, based on your last answer, it almost sounds like, again, that diversity is part of the DNA. So have you had to sort of put a public focus, if you will, on diversity over the last few
Yeah,
years?
I wouldn't call it a public focus, but I will say that, it's part of our culture. Our strategic plan is called the equity imperative. Because we want to be on the equity side of the conversation of the future of America, and we're designing the university based on the goals set in the equity imperative. Right? We have the first the Center for Multicultural. I'm not going to get the acronym right, but it is a diversity center that focuses not only on ethnic diversity but also on gender diversity and sexual preference diversity. I have, my pronouns are him and he and him, and the whole, we encourage the university emails to put their pronouns on the emails, right? And so we try to look at it holistically, but also, a lot of the leaders, the activist leaders in the district who are students are UDC students. And so even if we didn't want to stay on our toes from a diversity perspective, we don't have a choice because they keep us on our toes.
Your alumni does, yeah.
Not the alumni, the students.
The
students, yeah, and the alumni now, yeah.
That's great. So to that end, what would be your advice and counsel to young people when they say they're interested in bettering cross-cultural relations and working to build a more diverse America or a more diverse District of Columbia?
So it's like the conversation we were having earlier. Governments are one thing and people are a different thing. Governments tend to have different conversations from people one-on-one. The gardens that you all are putting together, right, that is a China-America cooperative initiative, right? Despite what's going on at higher levels of government with trade and those sorts of things, right? And if you break it down even more, when I walk across campus and I see a Hispanic student with a Nigerian student, with a student from China and a student from Saudi Arabia in a group talking to each other as individuals, that conversation might start at UDC, but if it works the way it's supposed to work, it'll continue beyond UDC and even beyond their children. And I think that's how you build a recognition that at the end of the day, we're really just one race, and that's a human race. And the more we understand and recognize that, I think the better off we're all going to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Touche. Looking beyond UDC, what do you like most about living and working here in Washington, D.C.? And I know you told me earlier you literally commute to your job by foot. You come to work on foot, so you live very, very close to the university here. But what do you like living and working? What do you like about
Yeah, I live 2 blocks from here. So my wife and I are in a debate, and I think I'm going to lose it, about where to retire. She wants to retire in the district. We don't own a car. We walk everywhere, and when we can't walk, we'll Uber, and that suits us just fine. The museums here are mostly all free, not all. There's a great theater environment. You meet great people like Mr. Sam Mock over here, who is a good acquaintance and friend to have, and he introduces you to interesting people around, a lot of interesting people to meet. But at the end of the day, DC wants to be a model urban community that's sustainable, resilient, and equitable. And it's gone a good way toward the sustainability and the resilience part, but the equity is something they haven't quite gotten down yet. And I like being part of an institution that's part of a process that's bringing the equity to the equation that the district says it wants to solve.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, then my next question is, that's kind of a perfect segue for it. So what do you see as Washington, D.C. as the district's greatest challenge?
I think the equity is the challenge, because Washington is actually the richest and poorest city in America, and the divide is stark when you, depending on what part of the city you drive around in. I call this neighborhood Urbania. No, wait, Suburbia, Urburbia, right? Because it's like a suburb in the city. But if you go across the river to the Anacostia community, in certain parts of it, you're going to see an entirely different DC, right? And it shouldn't be that way. But it is something that I think the district is going to have to resolve if it's going to be the model urban community it claims it wants to be.
Interesting. So are there lessons, and maybe you said this earlier and I didn't, but I'll ask it a different way. Are there lessons that this district government could learn from the University of the District of Columbia in terms of, you're obviously pushing equity here on the campus. I mean, do you feel that you're in a kind of leadership position on behalf of the city as well in sort of achieving the vision that you just outlined?
Kind of, sort of. I'm not from D.C., right? And D.C. is a place of tradition and history and long-standing relationships, as you might imagine, right? So there's that. And then technically, I work for the mayor. You know, the mayor appoints my board, and so ultimately, the mayor's vision is the vision that is going to define the future of the district, including the District of Columbia. But I do think we've been effective at making the point that if D.C. wants to be a state, you can't have a state without a strong state system of higher education, right? And that is UDC, right? And you can't have a pathway to the middle class, which is something the mayor talks about all the time, right? By building a city for the people that are already in the middle class, right? You have to build the pathway. And there's only one pathway, and that's UDC, right? And so if there were lessons I could pass on, it would be, embrace the asset that someone from the outside maybe can see a little better than you can because you're too close to it, And that asset is a public institution of higher learning that is affordable, that is equitable, and that has high quality accredited programs, right? All that you have to do is embrace it and put some money into it, and it can really take you a long way.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, my final question, I have to ask this. As a board member of the National China Garden Foundation, I have to ask this. What do you think about our project to build a true national China garden at the National Arboretum? From your perspective, how could such a garden contribute to better understanding between the peoples of the United States and the District of Columbia and China?
So I think it's a wonderful idea, first of all. Second, I've probably been to China 4 times, maybe 5 now. And it is a wonderful place full of wonderful people, right? And you don't always get to see that or understand that when the media or the political leaders on this end try to paint a different picture, right? And I think the more we can paint a realistic picture of China and what it is and what it represents and who the people are in a place that draws Americans to it, I think that'd be a great thing. I really do. I wish I had a few $1 million to put into it, but I'm sure that you guys will figure it out because I think it's a worthwhile project, and anything I can do to help, I'd certainly be willing to do it.
Great, thank you. Well, on behalf of the National China Garden Foundation, Dr. Ronald Mason, thank you very much for spending some time with us and sharing your thoughts and perspectives with our friends and followers. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure was all mine.